Welcome to Xhibition, an Xbox podcast, and we have a very special episode today with the 20th anniversary of Xbox and Halo getting celebrated on November the 15th. But I thought that I would go ahead and have a couple of awesome guests on today to join me in celebrating and talk more about the past history of Xbox and their history together. I have Sean Capri of the Xbox Drive and a wide variety of other shows, and then Luke Lohr at Insipid Ghost from Xbox Expansion Pass. How you guys doing tonight?
Back and better than ever, Luke. What's up?
Yeah, man. It has been
awesome.
too long. It's great. I'm so excited. There's so many things to talk about this weekend, next week. It's cool seeing the vibe around Xbox, and I'm feeling good, man. I'm excited.
Yeah, that's awesome. Sean, how you feeling? What's the vibe going into the 20th anniversary?
I feel like I had this realization in the last 24 hours that my daughter shares a birthday with Halo, and I didn't realize that was a thing until like just now. So here we are, man. We're getting ready to celebrate my daughter's third birthday, and who knows what could be happening on Monday as we're heading on into the weekend as we record this. Lots of cool stuff could happen.
Definitely. Lots of rumors flying around. We've got a lot of inside leaked / insider information talking about some Halo Infinite action to celebrate the 15th or the 20th anniversary. But that's something that I personally am very much so looking forward to, trying to figure out if I'm going to be sick on Monday. You know, you got a lot of things up in the air.
You sound terrible.
I was just thinking,
I know.
man, it sounds like it's starting to hit.
It is. You're starting to get that nasal congestion in the back of the throat. You know, it's got that.
You don't want to. Yeah, you got to be careful. You don't want to play around with that.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
Would you like me to write you a doctor's note? I will.
Absolutely.
I'm not a doctor, but I can write notes.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, anybody who retweets this podcast and drops a like down below gets a free doctor's note. Just saying.
There you go.
But to start off tonight, I wanted you guys to talk about how you came together, because I know that you've both been into Xbox content creation for a number of years, throwing podcast episodes around and doing a whole bunch of awesome stuff. So, Sean, do you want to kind of start off with how things began, and then Luke and you guys can just talk about the journey to come to where we are today?
Yeah, man. Well,
Sure.
I mean, for me, like starting the Xbox Drive came out of a hilarious conversation that I was having with a friend while driving to work, actually, thinking like, oh, I'd love to do an Xbox show, but I don't really know when I would have time to do it. I was becoming a dad at the time and going into work, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. This could be the show. This could be the thing. We just record this. There's got to be a way to record like a Skype call when we're driving to work. So the Xbox Drive was born, and about a year later, I was looking for a new co-host, and my good friend Bobby Pauls, the Nintendo guru, he kind of pointed it out because Luke Lohr had joined us on a stream. We were playing some games together, and Luke was waxing poetic about Phil Spencer and the Xbox ecosystem and games and everything, and Bobby had reminded me of that stream when I needed a new co-host. So reached out to Luke, and he joined me on the Xbox Drive for a little over a year, I think, Luke. So through that, we went to E3 together. We met a bunch of amazing people at that time, like really a transformational year, I would say, together in Xbox podcasting and content creation. Also at a time when like Xbox wasn't the coolest. You know, this was a long before the Series X. We were talking about the news stories about Game Pass, and then later on about games coming day and date from the first party studios. So Xbox has come a long way, and I know we'll get into that history, but a lot of that history has been made within the last 3 to 5 years or so in the storybook that is Xbox at this stage.
I feel like we were working together at the time where the momentum was shifting publicly. Like, we had seen it privately. If you were paying attention, you had seen it. But when we got together on the Xbox Drive, that was where it began. This public shift started to really happen. The One S had been out.
Yes.
The One X was just arriving, or right around the time you and I started working together, because I got that Project Scorpio.
Yes.
Which I always, I thought about trading that in, and I said, no, that is my Xbox Drive console. That kind of represented that year we had together. And when we started kind of that journey together, I always attribute that link up to Bobby Pauls, because I got to guest on his shows at the time. I was not a member of any podcast full time. I had done it years prior in soccer, but not in gaming. And then when I got that call, it was the coolest thing, and it opened my world up to Xbox content in a way that it had never been opened before. And you know, we flash forward to now, Xbox Drive is still going strong. Sean, you're doing so many incredible things. You got 48 different podcasts.
It's true.
You just wrapped up an incredible Extra Life. And, you know, XEP is 2 years strong now and over 100 episodes. And it's kind of cool to think that, you welcoming me into the Xbox Drive led to what I still attribute to the best 3 days of my life, which was E3. I'd never had an experience like that.
Unreal,
getting to
man.
meet, it was incredible. And getting to meet, if you'll forgive the term, an internet friend in real life, and then making a real friend was really cool. And, I always say, like, we separated to make content that we wanted to make, and then rejoining was even better. You know what I mean? Like, we came back better after that time. And I'm eternally grateful to Bobby for that link up, very much so. And, now it's really, I think, fitting and cool to be on this 20th anniversary of Xbox and think of all the friendships that it has brought about and how many connections it has made. It's really neat. It's surreal.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things that I think that I've seen. And I mean, even going back to both of your communities in the past, couple of years, I've been looking into expanding my repertoire of podcasts that I subscribe to and listen to on a weekly basis. And so I found both XEP and the Xbox Drive. And I didn't even know that you guys had known each other, to begin with, whenever I first started listening to both of these shows. But it's been awesome just to become a part of both of these communities and to see, how people interact and to see the crossover between the two. And then to see the bigger crossover within the discussion on Xbox Twitter and in the Reddit post and just stuff like that. You see it thrown around a lot, but Xbox really, for me, it is the best community in gaming. Like, it is just a fantastic place to call home. And that's why I've become such a big part of it over the past couple of years and really thrown myself into it just because it feels like a good fit. And I think that's a big part of what Xbox is 20 years on. In the same way that you have people playing Halo at the midnight release of the original Xbox and that, 24-hour, 48-hour marathon, whatever it was, those same feelings and those same emotions and those same bonds still continue here in the podcast communities and, in the couch co-op sessions, whatever you got going on. It's so cool to see that kind of stuff continuing on all these years later.
I think
no, I'm interrupting you because I want to say something nice to you.
Okay.
I want to give kudos to Luke because I think he alluded to something that I just want to sort of jump on here is that now with the Xbox Drive and XEP, you have two totally different shows, and Luke was very courageous, I think, in creating something very unique. There's not another show like that on the internet. There's a lot of shows like the Xbox Drive. I just happen to drive a car and get coffee at McDonald's, which is stupid and silly. You don't have like a critically thought-provoking podcast like Luke went off and created. And so, yeah, from us splitting from the Xbox Drive, now fans and communities get two totally different shows. You didn't get like a cookie cutter type of thing. And I think that's to your point, Brad, that there's a lot of different angles that you can take it with Xbox because it is fun. It is video games. That's where we're laughing, but there's a lot of really great business insight to be had. There's a lot of amazing games that are made in different angles and switches and things like that Luke is much better suited to be talking about. And the guest he has on his show is, I think, just a sign of how dynamic the Xbox community is and the ecosystem really is. So there, Luke.
Well, that was a super high compliment, and I thank you for that.
I just think it's cool, man. They're totally different shows. I just think that's really awesome. Like, you don't really get to see diametrically opposed kind of ways to cover the same ecosystem as you do with Xbox Drive and XEP. That
means a whole lot that you would say that, and that is kind of what I wanted to do, not in the being opposed part, but in creating kind of an analytical and super thought-provoking thing. And it's unique to be in a car and have that joviality and get coffee and have that window of time where you talk about it in such a fun way. Like I have some of my best memories are of Sean hates this. Playing Halo Wars 2 while we podcasted.
While podcasting, yeah.
Yeah, and I would just sit there. We would just talk about games. It was the best time. I loved that time. And now with XEP, it's interesting because the Xbox community that I interact with there's some crossover. There's some overlap. People were willing to make the jump and try out both, but it is not the same as a lot of people that check out some of the other Xbox shows out there. And I would argue, Sean, that when we were doing the drive together, there were very few Xbox shows at all.
Right.
In general,
Definitely.
There really weren't. And now this wave of goodwill that Xbox has cultivated has led to a number of shows. PSVG was working on some, and those were really fun. The Xbox 2 has grown immensely. Yep, absolutely. I really look up to Randall Thor as a content creator as well. And it is neat, I think, because Xbox had a choice during the Xbox One generation. what would they do with their community? How would they approach games to go forward? And we always attribute it to being Phil Spencer, and he always attributes it to his team, but really it was the overall momentum shift, dynamic shift, mentality shift to say, all right, we're in third place. How do we want to go about it? Do we want to make new games, correct hardware, cultivate relationships with people, with creators, with gamers? And I think that's the mentality that everyone can play, that accessibility conversation, the multiple avenues to bring in diminished voices in the content creation space, in the game development space.
Yes.
The LGBTQ plus, blacks in gaming, women in gaming, and they consistently build these programs. And in doing that, it generates this positive buzz around it. And because of that, people flock to it to then now create content for it. And now, leading into a 20th anniversary celebration, we truly have a lot to celebrate. There's so many wins that Microsoft has racked up, and those wins did not come at the loss of any other competitor. Like, those wins never meant PlayStation losses. It's just been really cool to watch this era of gaming unfold in front of us. And I guess I'm grateful for the drive.
Stadia died. Stadia lost.
Stadia did lose, but Luna's, prepped to come on strong. But really and truly, I'm grateful to the experience of the Xbox Drive and to the community because, and to the dynamic shift, because it really has allowed more people to enter into this space and try out games in a way that I don't think they would have otherwise, try out content creators in ways that they wouldn't otherwise.
Where Xbox landed is it created an identity out of reacting to what was pretty much an outrage at the launch of the Xbox One. And what I appreciate about Xbox is it has an identity now. All of a sudden, I've been screaming about this for years, and they finally have an identity. You know what it looks like to play an Xbox game. You know how it feels to be part of the community. And this is all coming out of a reaction to everybody hating Xbox back in 2013, 2014, that era. And what they've done is they didn't just bend to the will of the people. They kind of said, okay, we're not in your good books right now. So we're going to go back and think about this and really understand and come to think about what this means. And what it means is games for everybody, making it accessible and in all the different ways that means. I think that word is almost limited, generally speaking, in the conversation about accessibility, but they're really making it so that whoever you are, wherever you are, on whatever device you are, or whatever budget, you can play games. And I think that just at its heart is a really interesting place, because they could have just done addressed every individual concern that people were raising back when the Xbox One was announced. And they did that, but even more. They kind of just reset and created something that is totally different. They didn't just go, oh, you don't like DRM, you got DRM now. You don't like Kinect, now we're getting rid of it. They did that, of course, but that didn't set their identity now. It's so much bigger than that, so that when you see Forza Horizon 5 is coming out on Game Pass and you've got 4.5 million people playing it in the opening weekend, that's the result of doing much more than just, I don't like DRM, I don't like Kinect, and all the complaints that people had back then. They've obviously gone above and beyond what people's primary complaints were 7 years ago.
And to their credit, they've redone services. Game Pass was new in 2017, I want to say. They did backward compatibility.
Yes.
They retooled all the hardware, knowing full well that what they had was not badly engineered. It was just rushed and not the design that I think they really wanted to make. And it's the same team that made it. That was my favorite part about it. It was the same team allowed to execute on their vision that they truly wanted to make, sans Kinect and whatnot. And then after they addressed that, they began cultivating, creating relationships with developers, and they stuck with what mattered. Master Chief Collection was broken. They fixed it, and it grew. Sea of Thieves launched to, I would argue, mediocrity, right? Until year one was in there. Now that game's, that can boast 25 million players have tried it out in a high concurrent base. They're bringing games to Steam, and they consistently are in top sellers on Steam. And the reason I think people are so excited about Forza Horizon 5 and are really waking up to the quality of Playground is because it's acceptable to be encouraging about Xbox now in a way that it wasn't. Because Forza Horizons 3 and 4 were fantastic, but there is something special about 5, and more people are playing it, seeing it, and it's available on more places than ever. Xbox One, One S, One X, Series S, Series X, Cloud, and PC. And that's just cool because more people are playing it and having a good time and really waking up to the idea. And as they bring in Forza gamers, they're going to bring in Halo gamers. They're going to bring in people playing Age of Empires. They're going to bring in people playing so many more things. And it started in a dire place where they could have left everything, and now there's so much to celebrate. Man, we got really excited there.
I mean, that's what it's all about, right? You come in and I think about, with the Xbox Series X and the 20th anniversary, I feel like Halo Infinite captures a lot of why Microsoft is seeing success right now, is because you're getting back to what originally made it successful. With Halo Infinite, you have, getting back to the Chief and Cortana. You have that same bond being brought to the surface, and you have, this open world Halo that really captures the vision of the original. And on the flip side, when you look at the generation as a whole, you have the world's most powerful hardware, which the original Xbox was huge at the time. I mean, it was the direct Xbox, and compatibility and, performance were going to be unmatched on this new piece of hardware. And you see that same kind of thing happening in the console space in 2021, where, again, the Xbox Series X, in terms of power and in terms of what it can do, just there isn't anything like it on the market. Obviously, the PS5 is a great competitor, but when it comes down to it, the Xbox Series X usually inches out a little bit when it comes to those third-party games. But again, it's not about a this versus them or a, haves and the have-nots. It's about everybody coming together over cool games. And the games and the experiences are at the center of what Xbox is bringing right now, where you have Forza, you have Halo, you have new experiences like Avowed that I know I talked about earlier in the week on another show. But they have so much going for them right now that I think it's great to be able to have more games in the hands of more people. One of the biggest wins that comes to my mind, you guys were talking about accessibility, is the accessibility controller. I mean, I would be remiss not to mention this amazing piece of technology that has opened up, so many customization options for how somebody can experience a game. Regardless of what their physical limitations might be, they can become a part of these communities, and they can become, as much of a player as anybody else without having to, do anything outside of the norm. They just find a way that fits for them. And I think that's something that's great.
At the same time, they, being a provider of the technology to gamers like that, they also became an advocate and almost like a spokesperson to bring awareness to it. Because I don't know about you guys, I had no idea that would, like, it makes sense when you really think about it, but I didn't know that there were adapters that other people, might need access to play games. So suddenly I became much more aware of an issue that impacts a tremendous number of people. And then they also, at the exact same time of making me aware of it, they provided an industry-leading solution to it as well, an affordable solution to it as well. They weren't looking to, like, I think Aaron Greenberg and some of the others have said, like, it's not exactly like a moneymaker. But I think that emblematic of, like, just they have examples of that across the board, that they're not everything is going to be $1 trillion seller. But it signifies where they're going as a company. And I agree with you. Luke and I have seen that live in person at E3. We've played with it. It's really interesting. And again, nobody was asking for it. That wasn't anybody, like, I don't think in a loud kind of way, certainly not as loud as people were yelling about Kinect. Nobody was screaming about where's my accessible controller. But enough people were, and they were aware of that this was a segment of players who were underserved, and they went out and they really went out of their way to do it. They could have done anything else with those resources. Right. And what I think where they are now is people often talk about, like, the treasure chest that is Microsoft. They think about the money that Microsoft has to invest in all these different things. And I think that's a byproduct of what the true benefit of where Xbox sits now, being owned by or operated by Microsoft, which is they're big thinkers. They're some of the biggest thinkers on the planet. When they think about, like, how do you change the world, Microsoft has done it a couple of times over again. So that's not to say anything slight about Nintendo or PlayStation, but I don't think that either of them can really compete in the vision aspect. So as soon as Microsoft and Satya kind of goes, like, where do games fit within our vision, where we're changing the world over and over again, suddenly you have to step up in video games. And I just don't know that call has happened for the other two. And it happened at the exact same time where Xbox was kind of on the way out. And that's why you see Xbox where it is right now, I think.
And no doubt they did the numbers ahead of time on that accessibility stuff. They figured out, I mean, they are a business and they acted as a business should, but no doubt they ran those numbers and it did prove to be beneficial to bring in more gamers. And the general goodwill that they brought in with that on a business front couldn't have hurt in any way, shape, and form. And the amount of
That's
goodwill,
the investment. I think.
Right.
Really.
I think you're absolutely right on the business side. That is the investment, and it's heartwarming to watch. And it led to an industry shift in what accessibility meant and could be. Suddenly, menu narration is the norm. Suddenly, there's a tab in every AAA game, accessibility, and the options. In my mind, I think they really kind of started around Gears of War 5, and then I saw them in Last of Us 2 and Tomb Raider, Rise of the Tomb Raider.
Yeah.
They just consistently grew and grew and grew. I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy, Eidos Montreal, that's the next step for the Rise of the Tomb Raider team, and there was just accessibility galore. And then in Forza Horizon 5, Far Cry, yes.
Far Cry starts out with a narrated menu. Yeah.
Yeah, and Forza Horizon 5, they allow you to physically slow the game down and preserve the physics. So you can play the game at its core, and if you are someone who has slower reaction times or a disability that doesn't allow you to physically react as quickly as you would like, the game is not diminished in any way, shape, or form. It's just slowed down to allow you to play accordingly. And add to that the co-pilot stuff that they've got in there. I was just messing around with my controller ahead of time. I would have to think that while that falls under accessibility, but that allows parents to game with children in a way that they wouldn't have been able to before. And Sean, I look forward to hearing that from you as, Link and Ellie get older. It's really cool, that vibe that surrounds the term accessibility now. And
it also ensures we're going to be playing for a long time too. Because even as you said, like the reaction time kind of gets down. I'm like, I'm aging myself, man. Like my reaction time is not so good. And at a certain point, my vision is going to go. And at a certain point, my hearing is going to go. And so it's actually, it's good to capture those who are dealing with that stuff now, but it also ensures that people like us are going to be playing for 20 years, 30, 50 years into the future.
I also wonder, this is a tangential aside, but with bots coming into Halo and drivatars being a thing, how likely is it that we get to have bots that mimic our friends on our playlists? I get to play against a Sean Capri drivatar AI.
The drivatars
bot
are the best, man. I love the drivatars.
Cool. They're so cool. But I mean, I would love the idea of getting to play against a bot in Halo.
Yes.
That is your drivatar or Spartanatar.
Yep, just teabagging all over the place. Yeah. Even little kills I didn't get.
I love getting the messages lately, like, hey, your drivatar ran me into a wall. I'm like, well, that's how I play Forza. So
that's me.
Yeah,
that is what I do.
It's always so fun to see those drivatars. I know that I have Snowbike Mike from the XCast on my friends list, and so every time I'm like, there goes Mike. He's running past me. But it's always a good time with that kind of stuff. And I mean, I think that with the AI, it goes back to what Sean was saying about the Microsoft technology they bring in, because, for my full-time job, I work with a Microsoft integrator, and so I know all about the tech and like what they're doing on the back end for businesses.
Do you know Phil Spencer?
Oh God, I wish, right? But what
Quick dial on Teams.
Yeah, but what they're doing on the back end with business is that they're just trying to legitimately make employees' lives better, and it goes back to them still having that same drive for the personal side of someone's life, where they're just trying to improve the human experience. And so whether that's in the way that people communicate through Teams, or whether that's the experience they have browsing, what came to my mind is Instant Pot recipes on the internet, but, to each their own. Whatever you're looking at on Windows 11, like that. Yeah, I know. Sorry, cooking.
Nerd.
I know, right? Yeah. But whether it be at work or whether it be at home on Windows 11 or whether it be on your Xbox, the focus is trying to make an experience that benefits your life and makes it better. And I agree that no other company is really doing that to the same level that Microsoft is. I mean, Sony kind of tapped it with the, freebies that were given away during the pandemic and the Summer of Gaming stuff that they do to give back to the community. But in terms of just providing raw value, through Game Pass and through, in comparison to other products on the market, affordable hardware, and even with the cloud accessibility, I think that Microsoft is just doing it in a way that is setting them up for 20 years of additional success on top of this past 20 years, even having achieved so much so far.
When you make your customers happy and you make the people who make the stuff for your customers happy, that's a recipe for success. And it's one that Microsoft is doing well right now in a way that they weren't necessarily 15 years ago. And then you look at other companies right now, like Amazon, making customers very happy, but at the expense of their employees. How long is that going to last? What's the shelf life of some of these companies that are so abusive? I don't have an answer to that. That wasn't meant to be like something that I'm saying Xbox is or Microsoft is right to do so, but it does make it a lot easier to celebrate the wins in the culture of Microsoft and of Xbox fandom, because you know that goodwill is being genuinely handled, I guess you would say. You know, watching so many of the Microsoft Xbox Game Studios developers out there tweet and discuss their work conditions next to some of the other work conditions that are being tweeted about from Ubisoft and Activision, it's really heartening to see the way that Xbox is handling things, and disheartening to see the way that others are. And I'm sure it's not there yet. I'm sure there's a long way to go. Certainly the industry needs to change, and we've seen a lot of great efforts there, and there's always work to be done, right? There's always work to be done. So here's hoping that the more they're able to adapt their development cycles and improve lives for their employees, that the products that come out are that much better, that much more diverse. I mean, as a accidental self-plug, I had Rami Ismail on XEP some months ago, and he talked about how there are so many developers around the world that don't have access to game jams, to going to a developers conference, to communicating with other developers. And so as such, they're not seen by Sony's, Microsoft's, EA's, Activision's, the big development people that might come in and publish a game, which means that the games that we play are developed in Japan, parts of Europe, parts of the United States. And that's pretty much it. Well, imagine when the whole world is cooking. What's going to happen? Mm-hmm. What are you going to get? What experiences will you see that we have no idea about right now? So there's a culture shift for sure on the gaming side, on the development side, and it needs to continue shifting for the best to come. And I think when we see all these leaked reports, Jez Corden reports of what's coming, it's like, oh, there is so much in development for this monumental delivery service of Game Pass that it only is exciting. It only is exciting.
That's the only way that it would be digestible, to be honest with you, just a short tack on there. Like if there's a lot to be coming, if there's more content coming, you can't charge $70 every time. Right. You got to have something like a subscription service, even though it seems like it's just a stereotypical kind of thing to do right now. It seems like a fad or a trend right now. It's like it's because there's just so much, and because it's a growing pool of people playing games. You need to be able to deliver that in a way that people can actually experience them. Otherwise, why even build it? So it all clicks together. I think that's the most fascinating part of it. It's a very complex system, and it seems like every T has been crossed, every I has been dotted, every lowercase j has been dotted also. People often forget about the lowercase j's.
They do. They forget about that one. That's true. Yes. It took the Xbox One generation to lay the groundwork for what we have now. And so, every moment of happiness is purchased with a moment of pain. It's an old Irish proverb, and man, we were there for that Xbox One, but it's really cool to be there now at this generation.
Yeah, it was rough there for a minute. I think Sean, when we were on Game Explain earlier in the week, he said that the Xbox One was the Sunset Overdrive machine there for a hot minute. And it was kind of one of those things where it was like, yeah, it really was. And then the Master Chief Collection came out, and it wasn't good. I mean, it just wasn't stable.
The disrespect for Titanfall, guys. Come on.
And that's the thing, is that games like that get missed, and things like it's more than just the games. It's the community that is embracing them or not embracing them. And the community was not embracing games on Xbox back then. And it's just one of those crimes. And people who were there, people who were in the Wii U days, like they feel the exact same way. There were great games on the Wii U. But if you were outside looking in, you're like, I don't get it. Why would I ever buy one of those things? And that's what a lot of people were saying about Xbox One. Like, I don't get it. I don't have a Last of Us. I don't have an Uncharted. And so like this Quantum Break isn't blowing me away. And it's like, that's not the take. But here we are now, a couple of years later, and I think there's excitement about Halo because it's cool to like Xbox again. I think like you can pick apart, and Luke would be better to do this than me, but like there's a lot of reasons why Halo is shaping up the way that it is. But I think like a simpler way to look at it is, one, it's been a number of years since the last Halo, so it's had a time to rest. And there's been a lot of work just in Xbox in general. So it's like people are being very loud about Halo once again because it's okay to be in the Xbox camp. And that's a lot more work than just making a good game, because I think that Xbox has had good games over the last 7 years. It just hasn't been very cool to wear an Xbox shirt or to talk about it or to podcast about it. I think that has a lot to do with where we're at now.
It's true. I agree.
Yeah. So what do you guys think would have happened if Titanfall came out like now, like when everything's on the rise and this was the first time we'd ever heard of Titanfall? Could you imagine what that would be like?
Yeah, on a system that didn't require Connect or was underpowered and ran at 900p and all those that costed more than a PS4, like would have been enormous. It should have been, because it had that kind of reveal. It had a very similar reveal that Doom had, where people went like, "Oh snap, you can do what in this game?" Like it had that kind of, I've never seen this before, and it was just on the wrong system at the wrong time, the wrong sort of just community feel about it. It just kind of dead on arrival in a way.
Frustratingly so too, because the game it was special, and then I feel as though EA squandered it, because Titanfall 2 is this magical campaign, and the multiplayer was sublime. But they sent it to its death, just the way that I think Battlefield is being sent to its death right now. I mean, man, that game's just in shambles. As codes came in, I was just like, do I want to? You know, like what's the point? It's not ready. It's 6 months too early. Timing is everything, and when the stewards are not stewarding well, it's very frustrating. And then not everybody can do what Microsoft decided to do with Halo and say, hey, you know what? We need this to be right. Here's a year, not 6 months, not 3 months to fix bugs. This is a year of polish and fixing and correcting. And whew, man, like what a choice that was when the marketing's already being printed, but all signs point to it being the right choice, at least at this point, the time of this recording,
And the partnerships. I mean, they already had the Monster sponsorship that was already rocking and rolling. Like
I got cups upstairs that need replaced, and they got the wrong brutes on them. Dude, was it Atriox? Like, it's got the wrong brute. He doesn't have I got to get a new Craig model, all these things, man.
New Craig models
you're not fighting Atriox. I'm telling you, you're not fighting Atriox in this game.
I don't know. Whoever had the close-up at the end of the trailer.
That was
They made a cup out of him.
They did. But I'm saying the story has changed so much. I bet you Atriox isn't for campaign 1 of Infinite. Bet you it's in campaign 3.
I'm out of my element on this one, to be honest with you.
Well,
I wasn't even sure that's how you say his name.
Guys.
So what happens in the second book, actually?
I was gonna say I have my Halo books up here that I'm slowly working my way through on the shelf. So,
which one are you on?
I am now on. I just finished Fall of Reach, and now I'm starting the Flood. So I'm just getting into the lore. And then I think you said that the book you're reading now picks up after the third book in this series, right?
No. The one I'm reading now picks up after a book called Shadows of Reach, which leads into Halo Infinite. Shadows of Reach and Divine Wind are both like.
Oh yeah, this is like recent releases, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm picking these up. But not to get too off track. While we're on Halo Infinite,
sorry guys.
Xbox and Halo are so intertwined, when it comes to their marketing, when it comes to what the brand is. When people think about Xbox, they traditionally think about Master Chief or Halo or Cortana. That whole world is so deeply ingrained in Xbox as an identity. How do you think that's affected its rise over the past 20 years? And what do you think the significance of Halo is as a brand? And we'll start with Luke on this one.
Well, it certainly, that's what launched the Xbox and really catapulted the Xbox 360 as well. Xbox Live, Halo, and Xbox were all intrinsically tied together, and that is what gave the system the legacy that we can look back at now. It absolutely stumbled towards the end of the Xbox 360 generation because of trepidation post-Bungie, with people not sure about 343, which is a darn shame because Halo 4 is... there's no way. It was the magic that made Last of Us work on a PS3 is the magic that made Halo 4 work on a 360. It was just stunning.
Those skyboxes, not to interrupt you, but those skyboxes are insane. Like to this day, I go back and play it on the Master Chief Collection, and obviously there are improvements, but my gosh, it's insane.
It was wild, but people were hesitant because Bungie wasn't there, and Master Chief took on a very... Iron Man was big at the time. It took on a very Iron Man-esque MCU-style look to him, and that threw people off. And then the art direction was inconsistent between 4 and 5, and I think that lined up very well with how poorly the Xbox itself presented itself, with lacking a central vision. The Don Matrick era led to a really confusing set of what Xbox wanted to be, and Halo was right there alongside it. It was confusing as to what Halo wanted to be. Did it want to be the next Call of Duty? Because Halo 5 certainly had all the mechanics of that. None of the soul of what made Halo special. Halo Wars 2 was wonderful and departed from the story of Halo 5, which was equally confusing, whereas Halo Wars 1 it really tied in well with the lore of the time. And it was just confusing. We weren't sure who was stewarding what. The comic books are where they killed the Didact. Master Chief beat the Didact, which is the big bad of Halo 4 in the comic books. That's very confusing.
It's very strange.
It's very strange. And so Halo and Xbox have really been intrinsically tied. And I think Microsoft did want to get away from that at one point. But they brought themselves back and looking to their benefit at this point. It looks like this was the right choice. They really would have loved to launch Infinite alongside the Series X, but what would the benefit have been? Very few people had a Series X. It wouldn't have showcased the system. It would have launched in a jankier state than it is now, and all signs point to that multiplayer, whether it launches next week or not, being very polished. I mean, those flights were incredible, and so they're intrinsically tied together. They're tied together for the right reasons, and it looks like there's a centralized vision that's going to allow the two to continue to grow over the next few years. I mean, free multiplayer, cloud-based gaming for anyone that has an account, Game Pass. It seems like they're building for the long haul in the right ways. I don't know. Sean, what do you think?
I mean, hard to wax poetic any better than Luke Lohr when it comes to Xbox and Halo. But I'll say it this way, in that Halo created Xbox in a very similar way that it had the power to destroy it in the end. When they got it right, Xbox came to rise, and when Halo got it wrong, it almost crumbled it. And it's because of how important and intrinsically linked that it was, that it almost became a bit of a distraction. They dedicated studios to it. It became like it was too central, where there actually almost wasn't enough oxygen for other things to happen. You had a blip of maybe something like a BioShock. Of course, Gears and Forza are things that we kind of joke around now. It's like there's only 3 things. Mm-hmm. But really, like there is some truth to that Gears, Halo, Forza kind of argument, in that there wasn't really a lot of space for anything else for other people to latch onto. If you weren't into Halo, then you didn't have an on-ramp into Xbox in a lot of ways. It's an oversimplifying way of saying, but I think you guys know what I mean here. So when Halo became so central to Xbox, when Halo's hitting, Xbox is hitting. But we saw what happened with Halo 5, with Master Chief Collection just faltering, and all the 343 stuff as well, like Luke said. You can almost watch the graphs go up in tandem together, Xbox and Halo, and then falling at the exact same time. Right. So it's the best and worst thing that ever happened to Xbox. We have an Xbox because of Halo, but we almost lost it because of what happened there. So luckily, we've got a much better portfolio, a wide range of games and game types and developers and studios and timing as well. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just there's like an awkward adolescent age that Xbox has gone through that I think every system goes through. Nintendo's had it, PlayStation has had it, and Xbox I think has had theirs now. And so you'll see it now become the handsome 25-year-old now after the awkward kind of high school and early college years, I think.
It'll be interesting to see the Halo show that Showtime is creating next to the previous Halo live action stuff, because then I think you'll
that's
absolutely
another distraction though. Like, and hopefully they're strong enough to be able to have that, but there have been so many distractions along the way because it was so good. Right.
So big, trying to be something that it didn't need to be. They were trying to be Star Wars, and Star Wars happened naturally for a long time. It wasn't forced. Forgive the pun. I really hate that I said that. I really hate that it came out like that. But Star Wars fandom built, and for a long time, it was just those 3 movies. It was just 3 movies, and Halo was just a few games. And then all of a sudden, you have live action versions of prequels to Halo 5, but then the marketing is incredible for Halo 5 live action stuff, but then it doesn't match the game at all. It was distracting, and it was confusing to a consumer, whereas now it seems to be far more congealed. Perhaps the MCU taught bigger companies like Microsoft what to do with how to create a vision and stick to it, beginning to end, like how to make a storyboard for what we want to do with this product, and how they tie together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they've created really dynamic messaging that is providing a really good skeleton for like how you set this generation up and how you market these games and how you bring them to people. But it also allows wiggle room, like whenever people started making fun of an Xbox, they made a mini fridge, on the console side of things. And whenever, like it's great. And, whenever the Xbox Series S leaked, you hit them with a quick meme. Like it's good stuff like that. that I think also translates over into Halo, where you see very well-placed marketing like these Saturday morning live action lore pieces that are coming out on YouTube each week. And these little small snippets of, trials for the technical test to where you can provide some hands-on experiences. To be able to integrate that all into the build-up, into the release itself. And like Luke said, whether it be released on Monday, November 15th or December the 8th, whatever it might be, the multiplayer is going to be a huge part of the next generation of Xbox. And I think that right now, Xbox has positioned itself to where previously it was almost like a giant circus tent with one pole holding up the entire building, where you just had Halo in the middle that kept this tent up. But now you have these new IP that are being created and so many talented developers creating these different support beams that if one of them falters or if there's a bad year, obviously there's a lot of controversy right now around Call of Duty and Activision, but Call of Duty Vanguard is one of the weakest Call of Duties in recent memory. But who's to say that if there was a weak similar style game in the Xbox library that it would harm the brand overall? That was a little bit confusing, but I think you guys get what I mean. It doesn't have to be a knock it out of the park, killing it game every single time if there is enough in the catalog to flesh it out and make something great no matter where you turn.
Well, we saw that with the Xbox One. I think that's kind of the that was the faltering of it, where you had like a Quantum Break, which I thought was a pretty solid 8 out of 10, like really good game, but it was really the only thing in that space. Like you look at games coming out 3 months before, 3 months after, like there really wasn't a whole heck of a lot, I don't think. So yeah, people were looking for whatever was next to be like, this better be the reason to buy an Xbox. And it, generally speaking, like that's a tall order for a game to do that. Like that's a Breath of the Wild, that's a Last of Us, that's a Gears of War kind of thing. Like it has to be that quality, and not many games do it. Like that's just too rare. So yeah, if you're not going to have that, then you need more games padding that out, and that's what they've addressed at this point, to at least to the point where people go, sure, you might even be able to look at the exclusives on Xbox and go, those still might be lacking. But there's so many games with Game Pass. Like it's just they've changed what you're even buying. Like you're buying the box, sure, but you're really buying Game Pass is really the thing. So takes a lot of effort and really smart and targeted messaging to get that shift. For people to get it. It might be what you want to do, but for people to understand it and go, okay, well, if I'm getting an Xbox, Game Pass is really what I need. In a similar way that people go, if I'm going to buy a Nintendo Switch, I probably should get Mario Kart or Breath of the Wild. That's what they've done, but with a subscription service. It's like, buy the console and then give us $15 every month forever. Like, massive change, man. Really, really smart stuff that they've done there.
Definitely. So I have a couple of points that I want to touch on before we round out, because I know you guys have other things that are going on. But one of the biggest questions I had, what is the biggest Xbox memory that you guys have, whether it be playing Halo 2 with friends, whether it be a midnight release or an event? I know we talked about E3 briefly earlier. Sean, we'll start with you. What's your biggest Xbox memory looking back over the past 20 years of Xbox history for you?
Why did you start with me? Man, how can I not talk about E3? How can I walking into the Microsoft Theater with Luke and just seeing and watching him buy a Sea of Thieves backpack, even though they gave us a free one 15 minutes afterwards. Definitely one of them.
See, that's my most favorite. That's dedication. That's dedication.
Yeah. He's like, I thought we were getting a free one. Where is it? I'm like, oh, maybe it was because they're selling it. Maybe that was the exclusivity there.
Nobody
we could buy
would
it exclusively here.
And they wouldn't tell me.
It was expensive too. You got two of those backpacks. But E3, of course, was amazing, and almost passing out with the Keanu Reeves reveal on screen, and then him walking out on stage. It's just like it was memorable whether you were there or not. And like I said, I almost fell over. I was screaming so loud, like I could not believe what I was seeing. But there's so many that.
You shouted bigger than E3 in the middle of their presentation.
They had a car. They had all the stuff, man. E3 was special. It was like, I don't know. It didn't feel like we should be there. It felt like we kind of snuck in and somebody made a mistake or something that we were able to go there. We got to plug our podcast in front of 3,000 people at FanFest. They came up and chatted with us. E3 was full of every moment was that stuff. But yeah, and the first time I ever played an Xbox was at a friend's house who I worked with at a grocery store, and he was the old man having all the people over and playing games. I'm like, I never experienced anything like this. To bringing like to playing BioShock for the first time and like not knowing that was going to be one of the best games in the history of video games, to going to a Best Buy and picking up Gears of War off the shelf and not being totally with games at the time. I wasn't up on everything. And I'm like, I remember saying out loud, I hear this game should be good. Like, I think that there's something here. And it's like, this is a monstrous game that I'm holding in my hands, and playing that and just embracing my inner nerd, honestly, has kind of been the journey that I've been on with Xbox over the last 20 years. Is I kind of, now that I'm married, I have kids, like there's nothing left to prove, man. I have like a shelf full of toys behind me as I slam my chair. I am a big dork, and I'm now able to just like live that for the rest of my life. And I'm so glad Xbox has been there for the entire journey, whether I was kind of like hiding my nerdism and just kind of like, oh, I'd like to play like quietly by myself, to finding my one or two friends who I could jump on a voice chat with in Xbox Live, to going to E3 with Luke, to chatting about it with you here. I can't believe it's been 20 years. I remember buying the Xbox with my younger brother when we finally realized, like, we lived in a household that didn't allow consoles, but if my brother and I saved up our dollars, then mom and dad can't say nothing. We buy it ourselves, and we split it, and we bought Project Gotham home. We played the Duke controller. Like, I've got memories galore with the Xbox, man, and all of them are very, very special, dude.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's those memories like that, you know, with the family and with, yeah, like you said, standing in the store and looking at these games, and you didn't realize how impactful they would be. I had the same situation with Assassin's Creed, where I was just walking through the aisle and I wasn't in touch with anything, and I found it on the clearance.
Right.
It was on the clearance rack for like $20 at Walmart, and I picked it up and I was like, huh, okay. And
this could be cool.
Yeah. Assassins, you know, that was my general reaction. And then it, you know, has just become this giant Goliath of a thing today. But yeah, those are some awesome memories, especially going back all the way to the OG with Project Gotham and the Duke controller. Like, these are the core memories that you see, you know, with these Hyperkin Duke controllers coming back today. That's like the memory that people have that hits
the
on
DVD remote control that took up a controller spot, the HD DVD edition that I had on my 360, man. Like, I had it all. We had our original Xbox connected to one of those like giant TVs, like the oak, like it was a piece of furniture.
I had one of those.
And I remember my dad blaming the Xbox for it finally breaking down. He thought it was too high resolution. I'm like, or this thing is 40 years old. It could be that also, but those were real things that happened in my life, man.
It's like when your dad yells at you that you broke the car because your stereo was too loud. It's like, what?
Yeah, doesn't work.
The car
like
itself, shook the door off.
Yeah, exactly. Stuff like that.
Honestly, if that was my kid and they just shook the door off, I wouldn't even be mad. Like, that's just really impressive, to be fair.
Parenting is different
kid
now.
over here.
So, Luke, what about you, man? What are the biggest memories looking into the 20th anniversary of Xbox? What stands out for you?
Well, going to E3 with Sean. So I'll touch on a few things. First, I saw Xbox, the original Xbox, when I was in college. That was when I first saw an original Xbox. I was in my first year of college, and I was introduced to the idea of a hard drive. I knew it had been out for a bit. It was 2004 when I saw it, so it had been out for a little bit, but I'd never seen it. And introduced the idea of a hard drive. That's cool. That's fine. And then the Xbox 360 was arriving, and I had to have one because I saw Gears of War. And so I went and I sacrificed my body and I sold plasma for several months in order to save up money so I could buy an Xbox 360. And when I played Gears of War for the first time, I fell in love with the lore. I fell in love with the world building, what they were doing. That Mad World trailer was special. It hadn't been done at the time. I think we see a lot of examples of things like that now, but it hadn't been done at the time. And it was just this next-gen experience. I mean, you went from SD to HD with the Xbox 360. You could literally toggle it if you had the right TV. And I put on a headset for the first time and was talking to people. The 360 was a very special system for me. And I didn't get into Halo, actually, until Reach, ironically. But Gears of War stood out, and then in a much darker place in my life, I wasn't sure what I would do, and it was Gears of War 3 that kind of kept me going. I was like, I need to make it to play Gears of War 3, and at the risk of being morbid, that really did start my life over, you know? Like, I got to that point, and then I got a job interview at the midnight launch for Gears 3. I got my life back on track, which was really cool, and then flash forward, and all of a sudden, I get a text from Sean Capri, like, hey, they want to send us to E3, and I mean, that is still to this day. I mean, XEP is nowhere near that caliber, the idea of getting an invite there. And so it remains the best 3 days of my life to get in there and walk into that Microsoft Theater and see that green glow, and then go stand next to we played Gears of War on an Elite controller for the first time. Right, that was the coolest. Gears 5 on an Elite controller.
Yeah, Escape.
Escape mode had never been shown before. We met the cast of Gears of War in the bathroom, actually, and then we got to meet them for real. And then, we met the team behind. I met the team behind Sea of Thieves. Sean went down and I think was trying xCloud while I was doing that, and then we quit. I call Sean while he's in the line for a different game, and I'm like, "Come here," and he didn't believe me. He thought I was being silly and trolling him. He gets in line next to me, and suddenly we're talking to Phil Spencer, and he's doing his fan greet thing. But it was really special for me to be next to this guy who has been evangelized by our community to the point where he's probably doesn't like it. But it was cool to just talk to him. And he had a Halo Infinite shirt on in 2019. And that was just the coolest thing. And then, flash forward, Sean and I are buddies and talking, and Series X is out, and we're looking at these anniversary celebrations. We're on the eve of Halo Infinite. Forza Horizon 5 is what, 6 million players at the time we're doing this. It's just surreal to think the journey that we've come on. So I don't know what my answer was to your question, but it's just
It was an unfair question. Let's be honest. You can't do 20 years and you're going to get a bit of a ramble from us on that, man.
I mean, that's the point. I mean, you look back and there's so many memories that you see and so many experiences that you've both had. I've unfortunately never been lucky enough to go to an E3, obviously, much like anybody else that grew up with these E3 events in their timelines and in their TV feeds. If G4 back in the day, was broadcasting E3, I was watching it. And it's a lifelong dream, but to hear these stories and to hear, you run into the cast of Gears of War in the bathroom and you're like, getting to meet Phil Spencer, even if it is at a meet and greet, like that kind of stuff is just the essence of what the community is about. It's this passion that you bring, for Xbox. And then it goes back to my biggest memory, which is the first time that I ever played Halo. It was the classic middle school memory of I went over to my friend's house for a sleepover, and I had never even touched an Xbox before. And he had, the original Xbox with Halo 2 popped in with 2 wired controllers ready to go, thick CRT TV, split screen.
Nice.
We're talking from right around 6 p.m. probably until 3 a.m. It was just continual Halo 2. Domino's Pizza, you got Mountain Dew, you've got Halo 2 on the CRT. It's just that is whenever I immediately realized this is different. This is a game that's completely in a new realm for me.
You describing that, I'll be 36 very, very soon, and you describing that, I'm tired thinking about that, staying up. My back hurts thinking about the Mountain Dew and pizza, and I'm like, oh, man, hope you had good lumbar support in the chair, Oh,
but you assumed there were chairs. We were in the floor, dude. We were just sitting in the middle of the floor, just crunched over like a shrimp, just no back support.
What nostalgia. Oh, man, that's fun.
Yeah, man.
I mean, I played Halo, Alan Wake Remastered the other day, and it flashed me back to when that game first came out and sitting there. And there was a special time in the 360's life where Halo 2 was transitioning to Halo 3, Gears of War was out, Alan Wake was new, Mass Effect was special and exclusive. Like, there was just this time where 360 dominated everything. And gaming is cyclical, and so PlayStation had its run, and now it's very weird to watch all three be very successful. But I love it. It's great. But yeah, man. I'm sorry. I cut you all off for just getting excited there. But thinking about you guys sitting there playing Halo 2 and probably the same maps over and over again. I mean, it was like GoldenEye probably for me, like what a cool, fun moment and thing. That's dope.
And I think I remember. No, go ahead. No, go ahead. You're good.
I was going to say, I remember discovering LAN parties by accident, actually. A friend of mine had called me over, and he's like, I had to drop something off, whatever. I think I'd borrowed a movie or something. He's like, come on over and drop it off, or just have a couple friends over. So I walk in the door, and something is happening. There's cars down the street, and I can't even get in. There's TV set up all over the place. I'm like, what are you guys doing? They're like, it's Halo. To them, it was just like a Saturday. And I'm like, what is this? And just seeing the organization and the excitement, and just everybody was in it. And that changed everything, man. We would do that at my place. We'd have 2 Xboxes in the main floor and then in the basement, and connected by a 50-foot Ethernet cable. And we would have a makeshift LAN party there. And you could hear people upstairs screaming oh, you got me. It was just, there are a trillion memories. And man, like the one thing that kind of jumps out to me is as we scream and fight about how many teraflops this thing's got and how many frames per second and stuff. Luke said about when he wanted to buy a 360, the thing that made me want to buy a 360 was that you could turn it on with a wireless controller. And I'm like, I need that in my life, man. Everything up until that point was wired and you'd have to go up and push the button on the thing. Like that blew my mind, man. So we've come a long way since even those very humble beginnings in the 360 days and the rite of passage that you'd have with the three rings, the red ring of death. Like there's a lot of stuff that's happened that, yeah, it's kind of fun to talk and be nostalgic about.
I want shout out to Ryan McCaffrey's Unlocked. I think it was Unlocked 201, where he had Seamus Blackley, Peter Moore, Phil Spencer, all on to talk about their memories of the 360 and the original Xbox. That is one of my favorite podcasts.
Timeless.
And it's very timeless. And I would recommend any listener now go listen to that because it was cool. It was just neat to hear the creators of Xbox talk about what they did well, what they did poorly,
even why it's green, even why the color is green.
Yeah,
is in that conversation.
Yeah. And how you tell your boss that you need to spend $1 billion to fix a mistake, you know? And had they not done it, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
That's right.
That's just crazy to me.
It's so cool to hear everybody's different perspective on how Xbox has shifted over the years and how you first came into contact with it. And I think to your point, Luke, the coolest thing that I see about a new generation is that a whole new group of players are going to jump in for the first time. Jump in being a pun that I didn't mean to make, but
nice.
You'll see people that are coming into the Xbox ecosystem and into gaming for the first time, where GoldenEye was an experience that a generation had, and Halo 2 was one that I had. And then looking forward, Halo Infinite and even Battlefield or whatever the game is going to be, that is going to be something that is fundamental to where in 20 years, whenever somebody that is 10 right now is hosting a podcast, they'll be talking about the night that Halo Infinite launched, surprisingly early, potentially. Who knows? I don't know. But, it's those stories that are coming that are going to be, what people talk about. And I think that's amazing to think about how that's being formed right now. And it wouldn't be around if the choice hadn't been made to save Xbox and this incredible redemption arc had been, heralded in by this amazing team that's led by a very good leader. I think that's the biggest thing for me.
That's a good point.
So to round out the show, where do you think that Xbox is going in the future? This is a very brief, just overview, nothing that has to be an in-depth marketing strategy or anything like that. What's the one big thing that you guys think is going to be talked about 20 years from today? And we'll start with Sean.
You're going to be playing this thing on every single device. You're going to be playing it on your fridge. You're going to be playing it in your car, everywhere. I think that's, it's just totally just, it's going to be everywhere. I think it's probably going to be it. There's going to be big games happening all the time. Very similar to what you see with Netflix now with like exclusives launching almost, it's not even newsworthy at this point. It's like, oh, another thing happened. And then if something catches fire, that's when you start to hear about like a Squid Game or something like that. And I think that probably is where they're going to be. I don't know, Luke, if you have anything more prophetic than that. I feel like that's just the plan they've laid out at this point, really.
I mean, I think it's cloud gaming, which won't even be thought of as cloud gaming. It'll be thought of as gaming.
Yeah.
And it'll be AI. And I think we accidentally touched on something when we said, the AI of your friends. Like it'll adopt the behaviors of your friends. I think that's exactly what's going to happen. Beyond that, I think it's games played by more people, made by more people, and I mean it's going nowhere. It's the biggest revenue generator around. My hope is that it doesn't become a Ready Player One scenario where people are escaping only into a VR headset as opposed to the real world because the real world is dire. But we do know that gaming is a wonderful business to be a part of, a cutthroat business to be a part of, and if handled properly, there's just so many places they can take you, so many journeys they can take you on. I mean, that's why I play games, is to go on different journeys, to be a superhero, to be a Spartan, to go through and play in these worlds, drive cars I could never drive, and be a pirate on the Sea of Thieves. Like that's just dope. That's fun. And so I hope that it just allows more people, Sean's kids, his grandkids, to experience these things and not lose the magic that it had for us. That's my hope.
Yeah, I think those are both incredible points, and I'm totally in line with you where I think cloud gaming is going to be massive because, you see the same shift where every kid has a Chromebook now, especially in an age where there's so much remote learning. And so with every person having access to technology, and that's just it's become a fundamental part of existing for the majority of people, gaming coming to that through cloud and through even mobile games to some degree, and any kind of experience that you can have, it's just going to keep on expanding, and Xbox is a huge part of that. So I definitely think that's going to be what we talk about in 20 years for sure. For sure. But thank you guys so much for taking some time out of your Friday night to come join me and talk more about the 20th anniversary of Xbox that we're celebrating next week. And to round it out, you guys can just tell us where to find you and your incredible shows, because they're so amazing to follow along with and hear what you have to say on a weekly basis.
I was motioning to you, Luke, for you to go first.
No, you, please.
Oh, man. You can find me on Twitter and on Twitch at Sean Capri, Sean like Connery, Capri like the pants. And of course, the Xbox Drive is a podcast I do from my car. I order coffee and we talk about Xbox for somewhere between 40 and 50 minutes or so. So it's nice and digestible for you guys. Get it on your podcast services of choice. And that's kind of it for me, man. Thanks so much for having me on. This has been awesome just to even connect with Luke again for the first time in far too long. And obviously our Xbox journeys have been intertwined. So it's just, I haven't actually had a conversation like this, just looking back on the last 20 years. So it's totally right that it's with Luke here. So very, very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I was so glad to be able to have you both on, and like you said, your shared history. But Luke, where can we find you, man?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at InsipidGhost, and you can find the Xbox Expansion Pass on all your podcast services, of course. And then, of course, you can find another show I do called Cast Co-op with some wonderful content creators, and Xbox comes up a lot there as well.
Awesome. Well, you can find me at Jampack Sam if you don't follow me already, and that's over on Twitter, on YouTube, wherever you want to find me. And my podcast, of course, you're listening to it right now, Xhibition, hosted every single Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. But thanks so much for joining us for a 20th anniversary celebration of the world of Xbox. And until next time, keep on playing.